Okay, good morning. So today, based on the AP Capstone stimulus packet for this school year, along with several other online resources I've gathered, I have and will examine further the influence of noblesse oblige on the American welfare state. And before I begin or state my research question, there are a few things that are important to note. The first being, what is noblesse oblige, and I guess why did I choose to use this term? So according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, noblesse oblige, which literally translates to nobility obligate, is the obligation of the honorable, generous, and responsible behavior associated with high rank or class. In the context of the United States, this means that the wealthy care for the poor, which is demonstrated now more than ever through Obamacare, for example. However, while Obamacare did ensure millions of Americans with health care, it's still at the expense of primarily the top 1% of the population, most of whom make up a rather large percent of the national GDP. Now, in response to the unwillingness of young people to subsidize their elderly, a Bureau of Labor data analysis found that the top 3 jobs with the highest projected growth were all healthcare related. And the same goes for the top 3 jobs with the highest projected number of new jobs. While the job market does seem to be adjusting to its newfound inconvenience for stingy young people, such a shift does not affect the manner in which public health care is being paid for. So as the job market continues to shift more highly in favor of healthcare-oriented jobs, it raises my question that in terms of the American welfare state, is the noblesse oblige ideology advancing or hindering the United States' progression towards a nationally accepted social security system? Now, this can be taken from a few different perspectives, 2 of which I will be examining. The first being through the eyes of proletarian millennials, and the second being through the lens of Generation Xers and Boomers in the United States who may soon be or are already beneficiaries of welfare subsidies. Of course, before I continue on, I will define what a proletarian millennial is, and that being a working and middle class young person born between the years of 1981 and 1997, just for some context. While it may seem like younger people have more money to use, members of the working class cannot continue to subsidize welfare beneficiaries, especially at such a young age. In a quote from Derek Thompson from the stimulus material, it reads that Oxford University researchers forecast that machines might be able to perform half of all the US jobs in the next 2 decades, and that more people are pursuing higher education, but the real wages of recent college graduates have fallen by 7.7% since 2000. To address the first quote specifically, Thompson makes it abundantly clear that the exponential growth that we're seeing from technology is bound to overtake some of our more repetitive manufacturing jobs. For example, in 1964, Thompson also references that AT&T was worth $267 billion with over 758,000 people employed. However, today Google is worth $370 billion and employs give or take 55,000 employees. The efficiency both in cost quantity and cost quality that can be found in technology isn't something companies nowadays would ignore. Moreover, the limited number of jobs found in some industries is in turn limiting where millennials can work. In the diagram to the right, it is pointing out that in the first quarter of 2015, millennials surpassed Generation Xers as the largest generation in the US labor force at 53.5 million people. While this number is impressive, it should also be noted that a Bureau of Labor Statistics analysis during the same period found that 59.2% of surveyed Americans are employed, 3.2% of Americans are unemployed, and a surprising 35.2% don't even want a job right now. Numbers as high as that furthermore demonstrate that an increase in technology and a decrease in working class people will result in more weight on the super rich rather than other Americans. In addition to the mishaps of the millennial generation, Generation Xers and Boomers, who benefit from welfare subsidies, are not making their task easy. In a case study done by Robert Shapiro, an economist at the Brookings Institute, Shapiro tracked earning paths for generations who entered the labor force in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, only to find a sharp generational divide, in which the typical US household headed by someone between the ages of 25 and 29 during the 80s saw lifetime income increases by nearly 70%, while later generations in the 90s or millennials only saw 50% growth. In an article from the Washington Post, it also says that boomers were born into some of the best job growth in America, but took the best part for themselves and left the rest for their children and grandchildren. This is especially evident in cases such as the one exhibited by Rob Shapiro, as we do see this taker mindset through the rather large difference in wage growth. In a quote from President Nixon, he says that we must make sure that technology does not dehumanize work, but makes it more creative and rewarding for people who will operate the plants of the future. And that nations like people never really stand still. As change accelerates, they compete successfully and move ahead, or they relax and they will fall behind. Nixon, like Thompson, makes an argument that as the world progresses, we must continue to stay ahead, continue innovating, and continue to be creative, so long as technology doesn't hinder our ability to do so. In the context of healthcare, as the US progresses and the market begins to shift, as we looked at earlier in this presentation, there will also be the possibility that job growth will decrease, which could decrease employment rates among younger and older generations alike, which ultimately ruins the US economy as the amount of working class people decreases and the number of welfare beneficiaries increases. Finally, to reiterate, my question is, in terms of the American welfare state, is the noblesse oblige ideology advancing or hindering the United States' progression towards a nationally accepted social healthcare system? Now, although for young people it is an unsung obligation to take care of your elders, the US welfare system's recent adoption of a noblesse oblige structure is hindering America's collective ability to compete in the international market. With proletarians indirectly paying for the welfare subsidies of the elderly and the increasing number of welfare beneficiaries, the US's progression towards a nationally accepted healthcare and social security system is hindered by the noblesse oblige ideology. I would also have to say that millennials are correct in the sense that they shouldn't have to continue to subsidize older generations, and the federal government should be taking a larger role in funding welfare. And from that, my solution is as follows. Though I don't know the specifics of how this would actually run, I would propose a one-to-one healthcare system through which the young adults of the family, or I guess through a family system, would partially subsidize the elderly in said family while also receiving a proportional amount from the federal government via other taxes to cover other costs. Thank you.
Andrew, can you don't take your microphone.
Oh, okay.
Can you describe the strategies that you use to find information?
Yeah. So my first research question started out pretty different from this. It was kind of looking more at technology and its influence on young people rather than healthcare. But I guess as I did my research and started Googling things on that topic, it started to seem like there was, I guess, like a shift or like this, like almost like this need to answer this question on healthcare rather than the effect of technology on people. So, yeah.
Okay. Similar to the last question, if you could extend your research, what else would you look into?
I think it would have been better if, or it would have helped more, I guess I should say, if I had looked into the UK, because that was something I wanted to get into a little bit, but I was in a little bit of fear about broadening my scope a little too much. But that, I guess, would be an example of a working noblesse oblige healthcare or nationwide healthcare system, and I guess I would have liked to have gotten into that and been able to show that comparatively to the US.